RAW, JPEG, RAW or JPEG? Which one should I shoot in? Do you have this question? If you do, this tutorial is finally here. Check out on the screen what our objectives for today are going to be. We are going to understand what the three main differences are between shooting RAW and shooting JPEG. We're going to see why, as a photographer, you want to be shooting RAW if possible, and is it actually okay to edit a JPEG? Well, let's check it out. Remember that you can download the same photos that we are looking at on screen, so you guys can also play around with them and learn with us. I am Giselle Behrens for Photo TV NYC, directly from New York City with live tutorials on how to make better photos directly from New York City. So hit that subscribe button if you do want to learn. And our first objective of the day is going to be why we want to shoot in RAW between JPEG and RAW. So the first answer is on screen. Do you spot the differences? Can you see directly from the camera what are the differences between these two photos? Well, in the camera, when you take a photo in RAW, it's actually a little bit more gray, which is, as photographers, better. You might be asking, wait, why? What? You'll check it out and see why. Now, JPEG already has some color to it, and this is because the camera selects the values for you. So you as a photographer do not select what the contrast is, how the highlights are going to be seen, what shadows are going to be available in your photo, and the saturation, for example. Just to name you a few. So the camera is going to do all of those decisions for you, while in RAW, the camera is just grabbing as much information from the photo that it can possibly get, because it's taking 3 photos in one. It's taking a red one, a green one, and a blue one, so then it can actually give you, the photographer, the control over, hey, what is the value of this particular pixel in RGB, red, green, blue? This means that if you do take in RAW, you're going to have so much more flexibility in editing, which is our second point of today. Now you might be asking yourself, why do I have more flexibility if I take in RAW versus JPEG? Well, it's exactly what we just said. You have more flexibility because the values aren't set. You are going to set them as a photographer and as an editor. And here's where Lightroom comes in. Because when you do have a JPEG, the camera does all that work for you, which is great. We're not against JPEGs. If you do want to take in JPEG, that's awesome. It's just that you're going to have less flexibility after to edit. So if you do want a quick shot, you can just take a JPEG and leave as is or edit it very, very slightly. Now for RAW, if you want to achieve that wow photo, that wow effect, then you're going to want to edit in RAW, and we're going to take a look at the differences right now of editing a RAW photo versus a JPEG photo. On screen, I actually labeled my photos as red for RAW, so I have 2 RAW images that we're going to be checking out, and remember that you can download these photos down below. You can download them below in the link that is in the description. So here's our first one, and the first one is a darker image. This is Manhattan. I took this image, it was already, the sunset was already gone and it was night. And then I took this one when there was a lot of sun. So the reason that I choose these two is because when we do have flexibility is in recovering the highlights and recovering the shadows. What does recovering the highlights and the shadows mean? it means that we're going to be able to lighten up this photo while still having information in all of our dark areas, and we're going to be darkening up this photo while recovering all the information of the clouds that we actually can't even see right now on the photo. So we're going to start with a dark one. Take a look at the screen, and we're going to start with the exposure. Now I am in my raw photo, so I'm going to augment my exposure. And as a photographer, this is what you should be doing if you're taking in RAW, because you want to know what type of information you have in your photo. And by information, I mean what is available to recover. What can we show our viewer from this photo with good quality? So over here, I opened up all of my exposure, and I see that I can definitely see all of my buildings. They're all there. There's absolutely no loss of information. I'm going to go and do the same thing on my JPEG, which is this one. You can see that it's a JPEG right here on screen. And I'm going to open it up and look what happens. So what happens with my blacks? My blacks were already set. So the pixel already has a black value to it. It already has an RGB value set, and it can't go further than its limit. So if we want to check both photos, we're gonna see in the same spot how much information we have on our RAW, which is on the right-hand side, and all the information that we lost on our JPEG. You can see over here, there's shadows, there's windows, and here it's just a clump of black color. So that's so important when taking RAW versus JPEG, because it really does make a difference when you are editing as a photographer. So we're going to reset these values. I'm going to go back to the dark value, because I also want to show you what happens when I push my blacks, okay? So right now I'm going to go back to my raw photo, and I'm going to push my blacks all the way to the right, same as we did with the exposure, and just see what type of information we have here. So our blacks opened up, we can start seeing some information in the buildings, and wherever we have some dark areas, we can start seeing them. Let's do the same with the JPEG, only the blacks. We just want to see what happens if we open up the blacks. So do we see information in these buildings? We don't. Do we see them on these? Let's just select them both. Compare with C, hotkey is C. And let's drag this all the way down to our buildings. So where do we see more information? We definitely have more information down below on our left-hand side, which is our RAW, versus the JPEG, because again, it already has all of these colors and all of these values set for you. Now we're going to go to our other photo, which are the highlights. And in this case, we want to recover the information that is on the whites, so on the other side of the spectrum. So what happens when I am on my raw photo and I'm going to reduce my highlights all the way to the left. Again, as a photographer, you do want to be doing this because you want to see what type of information you will be having in your photo to play around with. And I'm going to go lower on my exposure as well, just to see what type of clouds we have here. So you can see these are so beautiful. All of this texture is just so nice to know that it's there, to know that if we do want to make a dramatic sky, we do have the information for our skies here, and it's so awesome. I love it. Now, let's do the same on a JPEG. I'm on a JPEG now. So I'm going to lower all of my highlights down to 100%. And I'm going to lower my exposure just a little bit. Now what happens with our sky? Because the white values were already set, the pixels are telling us, please do not push us any further. We can't go above the value that we are already set. And look at this polarization, how all of the clouds are not even there. All you can see are clumps of hard pixel blocks that started damaging and degrading because we were pushing it too far. And we can do the exact same value for both. I'm just going to copy paste this value so you guys can see the same value on both, and we're going to compare it. We have the JPEG versus our right hand side where we have our RAW. So you can see how the clouds are much smoother, all the information is there. It's such a beautiful image, such a beautiful texture that we're grabbing with the RAW, versus JPEG where it completely got damaged because we pushed our pixels too much. Now, why does this happen? It happens because, as I mentioned before, our camera, when it's in RAW, it takes 3 different photos in RGB, and it lets you, it just tags the image. It has the information on a separate file, and you can adjust these values using a software like as powerful as Lightroom or another editing software, but my main choice of software for editing is Lightroom because it gives me so much flexibility, and I can do it in a matter of minutes. In 1 minute or 2 minutes, I can completely edit my photo from completely boring to amazing. And in JPEG, these values are already set for you. So it's one file with the values inside of the files, inside of the pixels. So this is why you can't really edit it as much as you can a raw photo. Remember, if you guys have any questions, you can always write on the live chat or below down in the description if you're seeing the recorded version. So this brings us to our last main difference of the day, and these are just a few main differences between RAW and JPEG. I think that they are one of the most important ones. That is that RAW is quality forever, while JPEG, you lose quality every time you open it, you edit it, and you resave it. Why does this happen? It happens because, as I mentioned before, the pixels already have a value to them. So every time you edit a JPEG, every time you change the pixels value, it's going to be a little bit less quality. It's going to have a little bit less quality and lose its value every time you open, edit, close. Open, edit, close. Until one day, it's going to be completely blocky, the same as what happened with our clouds in the highlights when we were recovering the highlights. Now, RAW, I can go back 10 years or 15 years and edit this raw photo, and it's going to have exactly the same quality that it had 15 years ago, and I can continue editing it using Lightroom because Lightroom upgrades all of its information every year. You have different types of updates and every certain time, and I can just update the information of my old 15-year-old raw image and edit it again as if it was my first time editing it. So this is why it's so important that if you are serious and you do want to get into photography, you start shooting raw if you can. Now, the last question was, can you edit a JPEG photo? Of course you can edit a JPEG photo. You definitely can. I'm going to tell you why in a second. What we learned, number 1, shoot raw if possible. Number 2, with RAW, you have control as a photographer, and as photographers, we want to have full control over the story we're telling with our image to our spectators. And number 3, yes, please, if you do have a JPEG, it's better than nothing. You do have a JPEG, that's awesome. I edit JPEGs so many times because I have my phone set as taking them in JPEGs, and I absolutely love my Samsung S10 Plus. All of the photos I take with them, they're just amazing. Like, they blow my mind away, the quality. But what do I do if they're in JPEG? Well, if they are in JPEG, I just know where my limits are. And how do I know where my limits are? By playing around with Lightroom, checking the values that you do have with the exposure, with the blacks, with the shadows. And when you do have a JPEG, you're going to be able to edit it in Lightroom as well, the exact same way, only that we have to know our limits. If we are editing on JPEG, take a look at the screen. I'm going to go back to my JPEG over here, and I can definitely, I'm going to reset this, and I can add some exposure. I can open up the shadows. I can add some contrast. And well, maybe it won't be exactly as I wanted, as the raw image would let me, but look at that. That's a good photo. I did it in 5 seconds, and I would be happy to share this photo with anybody, with my family and friends. So yes, you can definitely edit a JPEG, but I invite you guys to experiment with RAW, see what happens, see the differences. The only way to learn is to practice and to do it yourself, to push the values to the limit, take notes, go as crazy as you want, or just do it very superficially on the top. You are going to learn either way. So if you do feel that you learned something, hit that subscribe button, because we are here every day at noon with live tutorials showing how you can become a better photographer and make better photos. So if you do want to have awesome photos, even with the photos that you already have, hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. And we'll see you guys tomorrow on a brand new tutorial of photography. Bye everybody, signing out.